KMCV Channel 7, the only local channel covering all of the CNMI.
You're just in time for tonight's KMCV News.
Here are some of the reports you'll be seeing within the next half hour. The chances of having a budget for fiscal year 1993 are slim to none. 2 senators walked out of this afternoon's conference committee meeting.
And a whale washes up on shore. The incident raises questions about the marine life in the Marianas.
And the CNMI Little Leaguers lose another one in the World Series, this time to Panama.
It's a field of stories on tonight's KMCV News. Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday cast of KMCV News. I'm Glenn Wakai.
And I'm Nanette Miranda. Thanks for joining us this evening. We'll have weather and sports a little bit later on in the newscast. But first, let's take a look at the CNMI budget for 1993. The chances of the CNMI having a budget for 1993 are slim to none. 2 Senate conferees working on the budget for what's left of the fiscal year walked out of the negotiations which were open to the public. Rota Senator Edward Maritita says he wanted to hold the same meeting on Rota and Tinian so that residents there could have equal participation.
If we're going to have this open conference, then before we even start to discuss anything, I would like to pose a question that we should accord Rota and Tinian the same privilege. If the answer is yes, then we'll continue and discuss the differences on the budget issue. Now they begin to address other concern, which we really they didn't answer my question.
What this would do is grossly disrupt the systematic discussion, because what we may agree here may change in Tinian, may change in Rota.
And then you have to come back to Saipan to see if those changes were amended.
And then we have to come back and sit down again and and decide whether those amendments were amendable.
Tinian Senator David Singh also agrees with his colleague Senator Maritita, but Singh also brings up the point that the new 3-piece Appropriations Act is against the law. He asks that they look at the original proposal, 8-226.
And the reason why I don't want to see no piecemeal or 3-part budget is because according to the analysis of the Constitution, it has to be a unified budget.
The Senate President backs the actions of both Senator Singh and Senator Maritita. He still maintains that the House is at fault for the delay of the budget.
Out of the past 1 year that the budget was in the legislature, I told you already, 10 months of those 12 months, the House had the budget. 10 months out of the last 1 year, they had a budget. So they cannot really tell us that we're the ones dragging this budget.
With only about a month left in the fiscal year, the government will most likely end the period under continuing resolution. That means each department can only spend the same amount as it did in FY92. If any of them need more money than that, Senator Singh says that the governor has the authority to reprogram 25% of the 92 budget. Department heads can approach the legislature to propose that increase. And without a budget, many government agencies are finding it difficult to carry out their public services. Take Customs, for instance. One of their duties is to stop the illegal entry of drugs into the Commonwealth. But this skyrocketing problem is getting harder to combat at a time when the department's manpower and dollar count is at a standstill. Customs Chief Edward De Leon Guerrero says the lack of more money and staff has forced his department to let some of those arrested with a small amount of drugs to be let go and released.
You cannot convict somebody simply on a field test. We send him to Guam for the crime lab, and the Guam crime lab have to test it. Then we have to pay for the chemist to come out and testify. So, if every other day I find a roads, you have to look at what the crime is, what the penalty is, how much resources you have. Everybody's operating on a very tight budget.
Guerrero says that for cases considered small, the expense involved in prosecuting sometimes doesn't make it worthwhile. In a budget crunch, the choices are tough to make.
We're not going to release you forever. What we're going to do is we're going to continue the investigation on your case. Find out if you're connected to another case. Find out if there is a larger shipment coming, so that when we initiate it, we tie it all into one.
In an effort to make do with what the department has, several customs officers are receiving more drug enforcement training this week.
Bringing organization to development, that's the purpose behind the recently enacted zoning law. Some say it's long overdue, while others are saying that they're trying to repeal it. The Governor's Council of Economic Affairs has now thrown its support behind the measure. It's 12 miles long and 5 miles wide. Chairman of the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, Jose Tenorio, says that isn't much to work with.
We're living in a small rock island, and you know, the land is so very precious.
The rock is being covered by more and more concrete. The CNMI opened the door to investments in the late 80s, but when that door opened, it also invited problems surrounding haphazard development.
I think we should have a guideline now, before it's too late. Even though a little bit it's too late, but still it's better to have now than nothing. Otherwise, we're going to continue to hamper the future. This will designate whether residential area, industrial areas, parks, agriculture.
Joe Ten cites numerous instances when neighbors have to deal with inappropriate structures in their community.
Somebody in the next door open a store or nightclub, and you know this was disturbing the neighbors.
However, some are disturbed about planned communities. Representatives Stanley Torres and Heinz Hofschneider are against the law and are pushing a petition to repeal it.
I think it's they're making a big mistake by doing it, because you gotta have something, and this is at least this is a guideline. At least we're starting it. This you can always modify it at a later date.
Joe Ten says with the zoning plan, the CNMI's woeful infrastructure can catch up with the ongoing development.
And coming up next, a look of what Republican hopefuls from Rota are promising their constituents.
And the sound of a bell rings in the start of another school year for NMI students. Details coming up. In 1969, voters in Guam and the NMI went to the polls to vote on reunification of the Marianas. Only 32% of the registered voters cast their ballots, and a majority stated no. That was the last push to reunite the Marianas, but discussions with many political leaders in the NMI and Guam indicate the reunification feelings still exist. In a recent Democratic fundraiser, Guam Senator Eddie Regis discussed the issue.
I believe it's something that the people of the Northern Marianas and Guam ought to really concentrate on, look into it. Sometime in the future, I think it makes a lot of sense, because the people in the Northern Marianas and Guam are all one people, one in culture, one in spirit, and one in heart. So it makes a lot of sense for us to get together. I think eventually it's going to happen.
Up until 1898, the Marianas were administered as a single group of islands. Back then, Chamorros were politically and culturally united. Guam became separated from the rest of the Marianas at the end of the Spanish-American War.
As the November election nears, the campaigning intensifies. Here's a look at what Republican hopefuls from Rota are promising their constituents.
The campaign trail on Rota is different. The island's Republican leaders say that unlike Saipan and Tinian, a lot of personal attention is needed to snag a vote from a resident.
We want to make sure that we go out to the community, do a lot of outreach program. We don't want to assume the public that they know what we're aiming to do, what we plan to do for them. We have to be, as much as possible, one-to-one with them.
The message each candidate carries is one of hope for a better future. Foremost on the agenda is how to battle Rota's high unemployment rate.
The people there, they really need employment. Most of our people there, they need employment. They want to work for the government because of the benefits.
But that promise is a difficult one to act upon. The FY93 budget has been stalled for 11 months because Rota and Tinian delegates are fighting for money to create more jobs. Saipan delegates refuse to concede in light of the deficit situation. Perhaps the answer to a time of declining government revenue is to create their own source of income. Second on the candidates' list of priorities is to improve Rhoda's infrastructure.
We need all the help from the private sectors, from the government sectors. We need the help to do our infrastructure so we can promote development
in that way, and also our port, because in that way, this is the only way we can entice investors to come in if this infrastructure are put into place.
With more businesses in place, the candidates hope they will spark more economic activity and more jobs. That won't happen unless Rhoda's leaders forge the way.
And we need other economic development. And if we don't find any other economic development here in our CMI, we're going to be in big troubles.
Rhoda's Republican candidates hope voters see trouble ahead, too, if they aren't elected into office.
That island's political history heavily favors Republican candidates, but as in any democratic society, voters have the power to change that.
There was quite a change of scenery on a local beach late yesterday afternoon. The carcass of a 4-foot whale washed up in San Jose. The incident is raising questions about the marine quality in the Marianas. This is what a beachgoer stumbled across. It's an infant dwarf sperm whale. If it lived to adulthood, it would grow to 12 feet. Wildlife biologist Derek Stinson says the incident is very unusual.
I don't recall another whale washing up in the Marianas other than that recent one on Guam. The length of shoreline in the Marianas is relatively small, so you wouldn't expect it to be real frequent.
Stinson says humpbacks and sperm whales often migrate through the Marianas.
There's at least some sort of minor migration route, it seems like, for humpbacks, and then like the melon-headed whales, and I think the pygmy killer whale are reported to be relatively common in the Philippine Sea.
Biologists did an autopsy on the mammal to see what they could find. There was nothing in the digestive tracts to indicate something foreign was consumed. At this point, the cause of the whale's death is unknown. With the recent whale carcass that washed up on Guam a couple of months ago, Stinson speculates on the condition of the surrounding ocean.
The incidences of disease and stuff, and it might be the greater stresses produced by increases in marine pollution. You know, I don't know if anybody knows what if there's any impact of like sewage.
We apologize for not forewarning you about some of that video. Stinson says he will not be surprised if more mammals wash up on shore in the near future. And the future success for thousands of local children began today as the 1993-94 school year began. KMCV News went to opening day at one of those schools. Sporting a fresh coat of paint and new administrative offices, Oleai Elementary is prepared for the upcoming school year. Principal Isao Nababo says students are excited.
It's a very nice school, very good environment, and I'm pretty sure that attendance is going to be very good this year.
Enrollment is up by 50 bodies this year, making the entire body 450 strong. Because of the space constraints, Nababo had to turn away a number of students this morning.
I have tried my very best to squeeze in everybody that came, and unfortunately this morning for some grade levels we just could not make rooms for.
So they have to go to other
nearby elementary schools.
Those that were accepted were decked out in their new clothes. Are you happy to be back in school?
Yeah.
What do you like about school?
They teach fun.
Fallon, how do you like the first day of school here at Oleai?
Well, it's a little bit bored.
And what have you learned today?
We learned about the rules in the class.
There's a new rule for meals this year. For the first time, children will need to pay. Starting next week, breakfast will cost 40 cents and 60 cents for lunch.
Most people would be pleased to pay for their children's meals.
What did you eat for lunch?
Spam and bread and rice.
Was it good?
Yes.
How was today's lunch? Was it good?
No, I didn't even eat.
Why?
I brought my food.
Must have been an empty stomach there. Longshot Willie, when you were in school, did you enjoy your school lunches?
Yeah, matter of fact, one Thanksgiving lunch, they served finihi for the first 20 people. That was good.
Quite a thankful day.
Yeah. The Little Leaguers lose another close one, and they get recognized internationally. Half a day, sports fans. In the Little League World Series, Europe and now Latin America each beat Saipan. Saipan wasn't eliminated with this loss, but must win tomorrow and hope Canada to knock off Europe to enter a three-way tiebreaker. We talked to Patrick Tenorio about today's matchup. Day 2 of the Little League World Series, and the CNMI All-Stars take on the kids from Panama. The score was 4-1 in favor of Panama, another close one for Saipan. This time we talked to Patrick Tenorio, who's the Public Relations Officer for the CNMI Little League Baseball Association.
We play against Latin America. On our pitcher is Will. He pitched for 5 innings. He struck out about 6 of them. That's about pretty much what he did today. They hit him about 5 times. And their bat just came alive again on the 4th and 5th inning.
During the Far East tournament, CNMI batting average was .337 with 15 home runs and 50 RBIs. And Wilton Nicotol was a pretty good pitcher. Against Guam, he had 9 strikeouts. So far, our team hasn't been shut out.
We had a chance to pretty much open up the game on 1st and 2nd inning. We had full base on both occasions, and our batters just couldn't capitalize on it. That one run we had on the 2nd inning was made by Ray Guerrero. The pitcher was full base, and the pitcher threw he worked our batter. I believe Gutierrez. He worked Gutierrez, and that's when Ray was able to score. After that, their pitcher pretty much settled down, and that held us. We created about 3 errors again, and a lot of mental mistake on the field. But it was a good game for our kids.
And that ends the Miller Sports page. I'm Longshot Willie. Don't go away. We'll have the weather report.
How often do you read it?
I read it every Friday.
What do you think?
It's great. I think it's a great newspaper, and the fact that it only comes out once a week makes me really look forward to it. I love it. It's got a lot of interesting news.
Gotta have my MCV guide.
And it's free.
Welcome back. Vicky Tudela is under the weather, so I'll be sitting in this evening. Let's begin with tonight's predictions. Expect less rain showers throughout the evening. Winds southwesterly 10 to 15 miles per hour, gusting up to 25 miles per hour, and the low temperature in the mid-70s. Seas tonight will be moderate 5 to 8 feet. Seas hazardous 6 to 9 feet on northern clockwise through southern western and beaches and reefs. 3 to 6 feet elsewhere. Our first tide this evening is due up at 9:48 with a low of 1.3 feet. And the tide will rise to a high of 1.7 at 2:42 early Thursday morning. The sun will set at approximately 6:35 in a few minutes. Sunrise tomorrow will be as early as 6:04. And for tomorrow's forecast, expect decreasing cloudiness and rain showers. Wind southwesterly 15 to 20 miles per hour with gusts to 30 miles per hour and high temperature in the upper 80s. That's all for our weather report. Just a quick reminder, join KMCV at 7 o'clock tonight for the John Anderson Show. John's guest will be CUC Executive Director Ray Guerrero. Be sure to call in with your comments and questions. On behalf of the entire news crew, thanks for joining us this evening. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Good night.
Yes.